Okay, governors, I'm looking at our time. We are on the mark. It is time for the interview and selection of the 2019-2020 WSBA president-elect. With what we did just earlier, this is going to be all done in open public session. As Jim McPherson let us all know, this is old school. We're going back to the way things used to be, at least with regard to these elections. So, and there's been a random drawing and a determination that the order will be Zachary Mosner. There you are, sir. Thank you. Kyle Schicchetti, the governor from Southwest Washington, and Alex Stevens will go number 3. Yes, Jim, yell it out. Yes.
Since I've been taking on this role.
You have.
I will say that in the past, the people who were not being interviewed were not in the room. That's just the way it was done, because there was this feeling that the third person then would have this advantage. So just a comment.
So there's a little twist on the old school rule, because everybody will be allowed to stay in and listen to the comments, if any, that are made about you. And that's all in the name of transparency, as we learned earlier today. So we're going to start. Zachary, if you'd please come up and take the hot seat and take 3-4 minutes to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, why you're here, and then I'll open it up for governors to ask you questions. Welcome.
Okay, there we go. Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to be appearing here today. I was admitted to the bar 40 years ago. I've traveled every corner of this state, both as a private practitioner and then as an assistant attorney general. I've also taught bankruptcy to WAPA and Lake Chelan, county treasurers in Olympia, many CLEs for the bar and other groups. I've been a featured speaker for the Eastern Bankruptcy Bar at Sun Mountain on more than one occasion. I've nationally developed ethics programs for AGs and other county attorneys.
If we would, if you're on the phone, please mute your phone, please.
And I'd like to feel in the midst of retirement that where I have gone, with what I have done, I've made a difference, and I think that's important to this board. I helped form an organization called the States Association of Bankruptcy Attorneys 25 years ago. We developed a national conference teaching program for 3.5 days every year. We developed a test case program causing the states to work together, collaborate, pooling resources, and have prevailed twice in the U.S. Supreme Court, once as amicus on cases of import to the state and other parties in interest. I've appeared before many courts of appeal in this state and the state Supreme Court way back in 1983 with now Governor Inslee as my opponent. I've been in federal courts in New York, Oregon, Utah, Florida, Massachusetts, California, and Delaware. My AG group has changed the ethics and tenor of national bankruptcy practice forever to the benefit of consumers, creditors, and government. I have real-life experience to bring to the office of president as someone who can forge consensus as an agent of change under any of the most challenging or daunting circumstances. I am a consensus builder. I retired from the AG's office at the end of 2017. I served as an assistant AG for 24 years, and I was one of the organizers of the unit from its inception. For a significant period of time, my indirect supervisor was current Chief Justice Mary Fairhurst. I learned to adjust my mission while serving elected attorneys general Gregoire, McKenna, and Ferguson, so that really makes me old. I had a solo career from 1984 to 1993, which thoroughly enveloped me in issues tied to office economics, client communication and development, service affordability, and ethics. During this period, you will note I wrote for the Bar News on key topics and began service in ethics as special district counsel. Later, I served on the RPC committee, later chairing it. I was also on the disciplinary board for a 3-year term from 2004 to 7. Concluding my involvement with ethics, serving the state Supreme Court as conflicts review officer from September 2008 to 2017. As I've learned in over 30 years of service to this bar, it's a dynamic organization capable of adjusting to any circumstance with professionalism, civility, and pride. The current challenges the bar faces require collaboration, collegiality, and inventiveness. I have the personality and background to bolster and support the effort and the proven experience to collaborate. I understand how to take change, which is necessary now, as you all know, and translate it into something good for all constituents and to benefit our membership even more going forward. But let's not shortchange what our membership has. They have a myriad of benefits, services, and amenities that is unmatched around the country. I know it because I've worked with lawyers all around the country. I'm an active collaborator that believes a joint product developed through careful listening, civil discussion, and reasoned investigation leads to the best result. In the past several years, I've served several nonprofit boards throughout the state and in this country. I was coordinating editor for the American Bankruptcy Institute Journal from 2012 to 2016. I served as a founder, president, and vice president of that state's association that I made reference to earlier. Some of my articles that were written nationally include the very current topic of unbundling of legal services, and I'm very well versed in the field and see the need going forward to look even more at that particular issue, along with the licensed technician issues that you heard about today. I function well under pressure. Anybody who knows a bankruptcy and insolvency practice knows it's a crisis, whether it's about family management, injury, mental illness, loss of a job. You are working under pressure in response to circumstances that are different each and every time. So in my service for two nonprofits in the last year, one of them was or did become seasonally insolvent during my presence on the board, and I caused the merger with a national organization which has served to preserve an important community asset. And in the other organization, I've been working on changes to the bylaws so that eventually we can shore up and modernize that structure with a long-term view to working with a parent umbrella organization within the community. The CLE programs that you are currently offering are affordable and beyond compare, and they always have been. The disciplinary process with which I work considerably is well staffed with seasoned volunteers and builds a solid record in each and every case for potential review by the Supreme Court. I've never seen any case by the Supreme Court where there is any inherent criticism of the process along the way. It is impeccable. The sections available provide avenues for education and changes in the law, along with building up professional camaraderie. And we need friends in this time. We all need friends. I've been very proud of this bar, and the governors that served have always been distinguished, well-versed in civility and setting an example in the community, and setting and accomplishing goals. I can be an active and constructive steward as your president. I have the personal people skills that you need now. To be 67 years young, retired, and to embrace the challenges of the future is invigorating, and I look forward to serving.
All right. Wow. Thank you. May I call you, is it Zach?
Zach is great.
Zach. All right. And you said you've been practicing for 40 years.
Yes.
All right. I want some of your DNA. Because you either started practicing when you were like 5.
Yes, that is true.
Or you've got great DNA, and you just actually told us you're 67.
Well, I think my grandchildren keep me young.
My goodness. Okay. Great information there for all of us. And governors, do you have specific questions for this candidate? Looking around, Paul
Yes.
Swigel does. Yes, Paul.
Thank you, Zach, for being here today and throwing your hat into the ring. It's very insightful, your remarks. I'm curious, have you been watching the structure work group process? And if so, what have you gleaned from that at this point?
Well, I've been watching from a distance, and just as much as I've learned in private practice and public practice to not glom onto articles, innuendo, or rumor, yes, I've seen some stuff out there recently, and I know what efforts are being undertaken. I also believe that there's a reform committee where there's a report pending. So I don't have a formed opinion yet of what needs to be done, and I'd have a lot of work to do to catch up and look carefully at all the work that's been done before and review with you what you perceive the impediments to have been or the impediments that continue to be in place. But again, I'm not that well versed that I would hop right in and give you an unchangeable opinion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Governors, I'm looking around. Questions? Yes, President-elect.
Thanks. I don't like sitting where you're sitting, so
This
I'm
would be your president.
It's okay.
glad to be at this end of the table now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question, right? it wasn't really a question. But question is, I heard you say a lot of, and you've obviously studied the bar, you've been involved with the bar for a long time, you've said some really wonderful, true things about the bar and its strengths, and I deeply appreciate that. But like all members, or most members, I suspect you have criticisms of the bar as well. And what are some of the things you have concerns about with the bar?
Well, I think you've touched on it by having the LLTs here today. There continues to be an affordability issue for the provision of legal services. Less and less people are able to afford an attorney for a full ride through the court system. We have diversity issues where if I was a person of color or had gender identification concerns, I don't think we see enough different people in the court system today, and that should be of continuing concern to the bar and the bench, and I think it is. There's a lot of good work to be done. The work is not done. And the transition with technology and I think technological advancement, threatens us in some sense in terms of what jobs and what work can be shipped offshore, what should or can be done by LLTs to reduce cost to clients, and how we can bring more clients into the fold represented in tough situations.
Anything else, Rajiv? Good. All right. Any other questions, governors? I'm going to look down the line here real slowly. Anybody? Okay. Question. Why would you want to be president?
It's an organization that I respect, an organization that, whether you respond to something in the newspaper or from what I've read over the years with bar reform, it's work that I would enjoy doing. I've always worked with members of the bar and enjoyed the process and the communication and the camaraderie. The fact that I'm retired allows for what I call less distraction, although I've always been good at management of different time and resources that confronted me. But I'm looking forward to the challenge. I'd like to wrap some of the things that have been concerning us all now for a number of years. We're living in a troubled time. I think we have to build hope and a core. And if we do that in this state, then I think it's transferable to other bars and to other parts of society. And if we ever needed it, it's now.
Okay. Board, has that raised any potential questions from any of you? I'm looking. How about on the phone, Gene or Brian, do you have any questions for this candidate? Hearing no, yes. Do you have a question? No comment. Rajiv's got a comment before we wrap.
I just wanted to say thanks. I mean, it takes a big step for any member and all of the candidates to step forward, and especially you not on the board already, and I really appreciate you stepping forward and taking on what could be a difficult responsibility if you were to be selected. Thank you very much.
This has been a pleasure. Thank you for involving me in the process.
All right, I will say one thing, Zach, before you leave, because it burned in my ears a couple of years ago. Jim McPherson, he's our resident historian. He said when I was elected, I ran after my second year and ended up, they had one choice, me, so they got stuck. But Jim made a comment that I think is very helpful, and I've remembered it. He was very gracious and said, "Good job, Bill," but he cautioned all of us on the board. He said, picking from within your ranks is one way to do it, but you should always consider the possibility of a person who comes from the outside, who is not embroiled in any of your discussion or the ongoing matters that you are dealing with as a potential candidate. And I believe even then Jim mentioned folks that he knew who did not come from the ranks of the board, who came from the outside and did a fantastic job as a president of this organization. So I simply want to make that comment to remind us of the wisdom that Jim shared with us back then. And I've thought about it a lot over the years. And I also then want to say to you, thank you from coming sort of from the outside, meaning not on the board, into this process and putting yourself out there as a candidate. Very much appreciated, very much needed in a time like you've just described. So thank you very much.
Thank you again for having me here today.
All right. And you're welcome to stay
Oh,
as
I
we
will.
move. All right. Thank you. All right. Our next, thank you. Our next candidate is Kyle Schicchetti. Schicchetti. Yeah. From Southwest Washington, governor from Southwest Washington. Kyle, welcome. And you've got the same protocol. Take a few minutes to introduce yourself, give us the reasons why, to a certain degree, that you want to take on this position, and then the governors will ask you questions.
Thank you. Credit to Bill. He was able to pronounce that name, Schicchetti, that name of mine, very early on when I was the governor. That's a feat that not too many people have accomplished, so kudos to you, Bill. I'd like to start out by introducing my wife, Pat, and my daughter, Kaya, who traveled over from Vancouver to be with us today.
Welcome. It's good to see you.
This is a kind of a homecoming for my wife, Pat. She grew up in Yakima, in Sela, actually, and I understand that there's a trip to Dairy Queen on the horizon where she used to work as a teenager. A little bit of background on me. I grew up in Spokane, graduated from Rogers High School. I moved from born and raised, 18 years, and then moved to the University of Washington, Seattle University of Washington, where I met Pat, and graduated from there in 1992. We met in our freshman year, and we've been together ever since. After undergraduate, I went to the Lewis and Clark Law School, and then after law school, I moved for a year to Olympia, into the code revisor's office as a session attorney. Enjoyed that very much. Many of you know that I have a liking for the legislative process. I've enjoyed chairing the Board of Governors Legislative Committee this past year and being a part of the Legislative Review Committee for the past, I believe, 13 years. So my interest in the legislature runs deep. After that 1997 session, where I might mention that I had a hand in drafting the official language to make the common green darner dragonfly the official state insect for the state of Washington. Pat and I moved to Spokane, where I became a prosecutor for the city attorney's office. I did that for a number of years. Pat took a job as a reporter for the Spokesman Review. We decided that we wanted to raise a family. We'd like to come back to the Portland, Vancouver area, and we did that almost 20 years ago now. And I've been, again, in Vancouver, I think, since 2000, and I've ingrained myself in the community there. I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the Humane Society for Southwest Washington. I was a board member for 9 years for the Clark County Food Bank, 2 years as president. I'm on the Animal Control Board, Advisory Board. We don't actually own animals. Pat's allergic, and Kaya is too. So we don't have our own animals, but we love animals, and I feel that's one way that I can support, that love, and also be involved in that. So I was telling Francis this earlier today. Every year, the Board of Governors, or the Board of the Humane Society, has a calendar, and they like to put the board members on the calendar with their pets. And I've always told them that me and the goldfish is not going to do it. It's just not a good look. So I haven't made the calendar. I've practiced for 23 years. 3 months ago, I made the decision to move my practice to Miller Nash Graham and Dunn. I have a construction practice and also I act as outside counsel to many businesses in Vancouver and then in Oregon, in Seattle, Idaho, Spokane. I've enjoyed the opportunity to meet people from all over the Pacific Northwest and represent folks from all over the Pacific Northwest, and I find that very rewarding. Before Miller Nash, I was an attorney with Bullivan Hauser Bailey for 12 years. Perhaps a year and a half ago, I had no plans to run for the presidency. I saw what happened to our prior presidents. I see the abuse that Bill takes on a day-to-day basis, and I asked myself, why would I want that? But this past year has had a profound impact on me. We saw the Janus decision last year that has caused bar associations from around the country to have questions about their structures and how they're operating and how we do this to protect freedom of speech and freedom of associations. And our Supreme Court was so concerned about that decision and its progeny that they created the Structures Work Group. And I was honored that this board entrusted me as one of the representatives to serve on the Structures Work Group. We have met along with Governor Clark and Governor Swigel. We've met 3 times. We've analyzed the case law. We've talked to other states. We've considered trends in the industry, and we've talked to the public. And we're about to embark on now talking amongst each other and figuring out what this structure should look like in the future, how it benefits the public, how it benefits the membership. And it's a very, very important endeavor, very important work, something I would like to continue on into the future. We also saw legislation to repeal the State Bar Act this year. And as chair of the Legislative Committee and one of the 4 to testify in opposition to that bill, we felt it was important that, at least for the time being, any measure to repeal the State Bar Act would be premature. I still believe that's true. I'm glad that the concurrent vote did not go through and that the bill did die. We may see it again next year. And we may be in a different position next year after the Structures Work Group has completed its work and we haven't had an opportunity to talk and figure out what we think would work best going forward, what we think perhaps the U.S. Supreme Court is going to do when it eventually looks at FLEC, and then come to a measured decision as to what we will look like. And again, that's important work, very important work that I would like to help guide this organization through this transition and into the future. So another reason why I wanted to run was last year about this time, we took a long, hard look at where our presidents come from. And it was sparked in part by the change in the bylaws that would tweak a little bit where the presidents would come from, Eastern Washington versus Western Washington. It's always bothered me that Yakima is considered Eastern Washington. I practice in Oregon too, and we don't have Eastern Oregon and Western Oregon. We have Central Oregon, and it's always seemed to me that Yakima, Ellensburg, these great communities are Central Washington, and Eastern Washington is a little bit further east. But we have Eastern and Western Washington. And we heard from members from across the state very vocally that it's crucial that we keep that balance. We keep having members from Eastern Washington as presidents because it's a balance. In fact, I think on your listening tour, Bill, you said today that you heard from folks who said it's very important and relevant to keep members from across the state active and attentive to this process. And I agree. Governor Clark and I took it on ourselves to go down the list of the past 86 bar presidents that have come from out of the Bar Association. And I noticed over the last 6 or 7 years, we've had Seattle, we've had Yakima, Central Washington, Yakima twice. We've had Yakima once, Spokane twice, Eastern Washington. We've had Mount Vernon, our president-elect from Blaine. We're missing a whole segment of Washington. So I wondered to myself, when was the last time a president came from Vancouver? And I'll let you know, never. Vancouver has never had a president in the 86 years of our organization. We're the 4th largest city in the state of Washington. We're the 5th largest county. Clark County is the 5th largest county in the state of Washington. We have a robust bar association, as Diane would tell you. We have practitioners that are parallel to anyone else you would find in Spokane, Seattle, Bellevue, Blaine, anywhere in the state. They would be proud to have a representative from Vancouver. I'm a native, but I'm not only from Vancouver. That's my adopted hometown. I'm a native Washingtonian. I purposely sought in my application process letters from attorneys and the public all around the state, and not just attorneys. I feel strongly that the public it's in our mission to serve the public and the members of the bar. They need to be considered in this as well. And so I'd encourage you to review those letters. Regardless of the outcome of this election, I will be forever grateful for the kind words those folks said to me, for me, in those letters. Win, lose, or draw in this election, and I thank you for your consideration. Those letters have meant so much for me to reflect and see that what others see in you. And so it really doesn't, it matters to me what the election results are, but that has been a bonus to me incredibly. And I want to thank those folks who wrote those letters personally. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. All right, governors, questions for Kyle Schicchetti. Kim.
Thank you, Kyle. I was looking over your materials, and in your statement, I was impressed with the positivity that was in it and sort of a hope for the future. But I want to address one thing, because we've heard it a lot today, we've heard it a lot at the last meeting, we've heard it in the press, we've heard it, about the discord in this Board of Governors, the mistrust, the lack of communication, all that's been going on. And I have my own feelings about that, but as does everybody. I would like to know what your approach towards the future is with regards to that. And do you see a way where we can transcend that sort of feeling about the Board of Governors? And if so, how would you approach that?
So we often talk about trust, and many folks have said that's our biggest problem. We don't trust each other. Trust is earned. We don't just give trust. We don't just give it away. It's got to be something that we do to earn it from our fellow governors. I feel that over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years, that I've earned some of that trust. Otherwise, you wouldn't have elected me to the Structures Work Group. You wouldn't have allowed me to lead at the Legislative Committee. I think that's where it starts. I think we have to earn that, and so that part of that is, a wise man once said, presuming good intent. Well, I think that's what we need to do for everybody. I presume good intent. President Pickett came out to Cowlitz, Wahkiakum, and Clark County, and we had a good discussion about issues that we disagreed about. And I have no doubt that everything that President Pickett is doing, he firmly believes that is in the best interest of the organization. I firmly believe that about every one of you, that the actions that folks have taken are what people believe to be in the best interest of this organization, the membership, and the public. I think getting that out, getting people to recognize that, would go a long way for bringing about trust amongst all of us.
Anything else, Kim?
No, thank
you. Good. Ethan.
Thanks, Kyle. And I'm glad that we're talking about trust, and I appreciate that at the end of your presentation you referenced the numerous letters that were submitted in support of your candidacy. And I see that on one of the letters it was written by an individual named James G. Fick. And he writes, at Bull Event we were both part of the Development Services Group. Our work focused mostly on complex construction, real estate, and business matters. Despite being located in different offices within Bullivant, we often worked on matters together, consulted on legal issues, and I'm reading from his letter, and worked extensively on business development. We worked together until September, when I left Bullivant to start my own law firm, Schliemann, Fick, and Scruggs. And I know that that was the law firm you recommended that the WSBA retain to perform legal work. And I'm wondering, did you disclose your relationship with that firm before making that recommendation for the WSBA to conduct business with them?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. No. Thank you. That was the question I had. And then the second question I have is, do you know whether your current law firm does work for the WSBA?
I'm sure they do not. No.
They do. Have they done work for the WSBA?
I don't believe so.
Okay. The last question I have, because I think trust is important, is that last year, in about March 2018, President Brad Furlong had sent an email to the Board of Governors about a trial court judge in Oregon that had treated a victim of domestic violence in the courtroom. And this is what President Furlong said in response. This is why, and I'm quoting, "This is why we can never do enough diversity work to address the power dynamics in our profession that harm the less powerful and at times cripple access to justice for our marginalized neighbors in our communities." A month later, you replied to the board saying that you were troubled by over a month by President Furlong's email to the board. And I'm wondering, what about President Furlong's statement about the need to do diversity work troubled you for over a month?
That's not my recollection of events. The President Furlong was commenting about a issue in the press regarding one of the local judges in Oregon who had cut off a victim at some point after 20 minutes of giving a victim impact statement. And he was criticized for having done that. And I thought prematurely. Of course, we work with the judges every day in Oregon and in Washington. And we knew that judge. And then there was an article that came out that set forth the concern that folks had with the criticism of that judge. And that's what concerned me, was that we wanted to make sure that the full story was presented. And I believe I sent that article to the Board of Governors so that they could read that and make a decision for themselves.
So I think that segues into my final question, because you're saying that you wanted to provide full context. I note that in response to an email that was circulated to the full board about the Oregon Bar's statement on white nationalism and the normalization of violence, that statement provided, I'm quoting from the Oregon Bar, "The Oregon Bar's statement in the bulletin denounced hate-mongering, referencing the white nationalist march last August in Charlottesville and the May stabbing attacks on the Portland Max train." And you sent a reply to the entire board stating that concerns that the quote was next to a statement by, quote, "several organizations which faulted President Trump directly." And so my question is, what context were you trying to provide in response to the Oregon Bar's statement on white nationalism?
So the controversy in Oregon was a publication that came out in, I believe, April of last year or the year before. And the troubling aspect for the Oregon State Bar members was that on one side, the Oregon State Bar had a statement that referred to the second statement that came from various organizations that directly criticized President Trump. And many members of the Oregon State Bar found that troubling. And
Did you?
And when it came out, no, it didn't. I didn't think anything of it. But then it did lead to litigation directly against the Oregon State Bar. It was the subject of that litigation. And And the argument was that our fees be going to subsidize this political speech. And it kind of underlines the very issues that we're exploring in the structures work group about, the vulnerability of our bar association, integrated or otherwise, for such arguments. Governor Stevens was concerned with us having come forward with a statement that would condemn the threats and the attacks on people for having given this statement. And I find that completely different. That's not political speech. That is condemning something that should be condemned. And I had no problem supporting that, and I think that was an appropriate and proper thing to do.
But in contrast to the Oregon statement, you think the Oregon statement was not appropriate?
The problem with the Oregon statement was that it was published in connection, right side by side, and that's what many members of the Oregon State Bar found troubling.
All right, I'll circle back with more questions later.
All right, Governors, additional questions for Kyle? Looking down the line, seeing none. Looking down the line, seeing none. Brian or Gene, any questions for Kyle? None. All right. I want to follow up with a comment that I made to our first candidate. As I am appreciative of people coming from off the board to run, I also wanted to say I'm actually encouraged that people would come from within the board to run because you know firsthand the good, the bad, the ugly of dealing with our board and the dynamics that are at play. Can you I have two questions for you. The first is, do you have anything, and you've talked on the trust issue, and I appreciate that because that is, I think you're drilling down into the heart of something that's very significant. Anything else, Kyle, that you could share with us that you could implement, knowing what the, I want to say, powers of the presidency are, which are almost non-existent, but what could you do specifically to continue to move us forward, not only as a board, but as a profession? Any ideas or thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the foremost issue for us this coming year and in the coming years is the structures work group and what follows from that. And this organization is going to have to be intimately involved in that process. The structures work group right now is scheduled to end in June, perhaps in July. And then what follows that will be implementing suggestions, recommendations, figuring out how that works. And there's no body of folks from around the state with varying degrees of practices in different areas that will be able to come with the knowledge, information, and ability to inform those decisions and make sure that it works for the public and for the membership. And so that I think is going to be the most important and challenging thing that we can do in the coming years.
Great. I said two questions. I actually have two more. The next one, we hear the buzzwords, and I say buzzwords, diversity, equity, and inclusion all the time, and I don't want those to just be buzzwords. I want those to mean something. And I want them to mean things in action. And I've struggled immensely during the presidency to get us directed in into some action to implement those words and give them meaning. And I'm not trying to neglect the good work that WSBA does, but as a board, we have not, in my opinion, reached into that pool of that area well. Any ideas or thoughts that you have given on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how you would take steps as a president to dive us deeper into those arenas?
So I would submit to you that there are many folks in this state in high, powerful positions that would disagree with you. Not necessarily the Board of Governors, but the fact that the Washington State Bar Association is known throughout this country as having a very robust and a progressive diversity and inclusion program. And in fact, it's one of the things that we struggle with on the structures work group, because we want to make sure that that is protected.
Right.
And so if there is a bifurcation of the bar, where does that go? And that is probably the single most important challenge to figuring out this structure. And so again, I think the WSBA in itself, all the training that we've received from Joy Williams and Robin Nussbaum have been very helpful to me over the years on seeing from different perspectives and different folks who come from different backgrounds. We can continue that, and we should continue that, and we need to continue that as we figure out what this structure is going to look like.
All right, last question, and this is the nuts and bolts one that I wish somebody would have asked me. So I'm trying to think of a question I wish somebody had asked me, and that is this. You just left a firm, went to a new firm. Have you told them that you're about to become 100% volunteer lawyer for the next, not the next immediate year, because you'll be past president, so that's a governor's type duty, I get that, but when you become president, have you disclosed that to them, and have you also considered that with your own family and told them, I'm about to become a full-time volunteer?
I hope they're not listening back at the firm right now.
They're plugging their ears probably.
I did. I first approached my family, and Kaya had the privilege to sit with me when I applied for Governor District 3 and came up to Seattle and sat on the panel and watched that process. And then she came up with me again a few months later for another board meeting. And after that, I was saying, I think you have the skills. Maybe you will be an attorney someday, and maybe you'll, want to join the Board of Governors and do this. And she looks at me and she says, Dad, why are you doing this? It seems like you got a lot of people who are upset with each other, yelling at each other. Why is that? Why? And I think I told her that, this is important. This is an important organization. This is important work that we're doing. And if I'm elected, I will serve the 2020-2021, which happens to be the year that Kaya graduates from high school. And that's a sacrifice. And in Vancouver, we're 3 hours away from Seattle. We're 3 hours away from everything. We're 6 hours away from Spokane. That's going to be a time commitment. But as you see, my wife and my daughter are here. My son is in Vancouver, my oldest. He's about to graduate from high school, and he's taking AP classes today, or tests. And my youngest has got a track meet. That's what's important to 15-year-olds when, you're 15. You do your sporting events. But they're all very supportive, and I'm immensely appreciative of that. And I did approach my firm, and I suspected after 3 months that they would say, what the heck are you doing? We need you in the office. They didn't. Denny Rawlinson was the president of the Oregon State Bar a few years ago, and they are proud of that accomplishment, and they would be proud of having the first president from the Vancouver office to lead the Washington State Bar Association.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it. I'm looking around. Any additional questions here before we wrap this session? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, Governor. Alec, you take the seat. The same protocol, take a few minutes, introduce yourself, and then we will go to questions.
Governors, I think you've heard me say this, but I want to really add to why I say it. It's when I talk about who our members are. And I guess it's really a personal reflection. I say our members pay our dues, do our CLEs. If we look at the magazine, we go to who got slapped, and we're done. Because we do other things with our lives.
No names are available.
And that is not a pejorative. I just took a look at my resume, and having been admitted to the bar in 1981, the very first time I got involved with anything having to do directly with WSBA was in 2011. In those 30 years, it did not mean I was not involved. It did not mean I was not engaged. I was engaged and involved with my minority bar associations. I was engaged and involved with my political organizations. I was engaged and involved with my church. I was engaged and involved with my community. And actually, in a great degree, I do believe most of our members fit that profile. Not quite in a 30-year gap before they get involved with WSBA, but a lot of our members fit that profile. And that's not a bad profile. That's a profile of serving our communities, our clients, our public, and other organizations. And that's who I am. A civil rights attorney all my life. And I am actually, when I look at it, I say, wait a minute, I've only been involved since 2011? Wow. But I got involved with the civil rights law section. So it was my passion. And with the arc of the experience that I had, I could step into leadership. And it's what I've done in many ways all my life. My wife Helena is here, and she will tell you that, well, let me explain. Since I've been on the board of governors, the experience has been something more akin to the Game of Thrones. I mean, we've really had some very interesting and at times not very rewarding times. But it was not without people not being in. It was because we had such strong ideas and opinions about what was best. But I actually do agree with you, Bill, in terms of moving forward, that we always will need three things: a commitment to service, trust, and relationships. And it's on the last two that we have a lot of work to do to actually support our association. See, there are times when we get going, and we heard from some of the triple LTs, we do hurtful things, either to others or to ourselves who are on the other side of whatever issue, without giving full respect to each other. Because we're so into being right that we forget about the relationship that we have to have. It is not surprising to me in some ways, and in fact, it is a good thing in some ways, that 1788 got the wheels that it got, because it got our attention. We just thought we could do business as usual. we could just have our fights or whatever. And it did get our attention that, wait a minute, somebody's about to actually change our lives. You've seen me say in a couple of my things, we're at the point now where we have to know that we are all reformers. That's the business we are in. How do we make things better for all of our members and change our structures or tighten up various areas? A few years ago, when Brad Furlong was the president, he began to talk about the programs he wanted to do, et cetera, et cetera. And I considered his short year as president, and I said, I don't think that's the way that works. I think you put a vision out there, but it has to actually take on its own life, and other people are going to have to put up with it. But I think, and I don't know, maybe we'll talk about this later, Rajiv. I think the president-elect and even the president ought to be a servant leader, assisting and facilitating the governors to do their work. As much as possible, playing umpire and helping to build the relationships among everyone. And during the time as president-elect, especially, I think that's the task. I watched this, and when I say us, I actually mean us. I mean me. I mean all of you. I mean who talks to whom. And I've said, okay, this has got to change. And it's got to start with me. In talking to all of you, regardless of the outcome of this election. By the way, I think somehow or another you have an embarrassment of riches in terms of the choices that you can make today. Zach Mosner and I were classmates at UPS Law School. And we haven't seen each other in about 40 years. And his wife was also a classmate. And Kyle, it's been a joy and a pleasure to work with you. So I offer to serve you. I've suggested things like getting governors really more so to be on the sounding boards going around the state, so that we so that we listen to our members. And I talked about something that, again, maybe a few years off, but it's just one of my visions. I don't know when we stopped having conventions, but as an association guy, I'm saying to myself, when do we get back to the place where we get a sense of the fact that our profession is broad, with people doing all manner of things? We see it with our sections, but there's so much more. And so I want to, I offer myself to do that work. I will do the work anyway. I'll be honored if I'm given the task. If not, I will still work toward the task, and I appreciate your time. Oh, by the way, while I said this, like my wife says, yeah, but you love that kind of stuff because it's a challenge. And I do love that kind of stuff because I always think I can help make things better.
Thank you, Alec. All right, I'm looking at down this side. I've been picking on the other side. Questions from governors? Let's see if we got any governors over here. Kim. And then Rajiv.
Alec, I remember those days back when you and I sat back there for the sections work group and how we got involved in that and how much I respected your commitment and your wise words. But you put in your introductory letter that I cannot hope to win your trust if I start with a lie. So I'm going to start with the truth here. As I read this, knowing you as I do, and sitting next to you and hearing all your comments and things like that, I was distressed when I read this first paragraph of your letter. I was distressed with the first reason that you gave for wanting to run for the president-elect position. And I thought to myself, it just doesn't sound like you. So I kept reading, and I have to say I'm a little bit taken aback by the tone and some of the negativity in your introductory letter. So, with that being said, I want to hear your plan, and not just kind of a general dream sort of a thing, but your plan to deal with all of this that you have in your letter that you say is an issue for this board. Because I agree that I think we all know that we're all coming from a place of good intent. Somehow that gets lost in the delivery and transition. So please tell me that there's more to you wanting to be president-elect than what's in this first couple of paragraphs.
Well, let's start with relationship. Do we think our relationships are great?
You and me?
No, I'm talking about as a board of governors. But I actually think that we've had less time where we actually spend just getting to know one another. Far less time this year than the year before. But what that also means, because since we have had factions, we don't all talk to each other. Some people talk to some people. Other people talk to other people. There are discussions that are held, but we rarely have a exchange of views. And then it kind of, at meetings, spills out into questions about who we trust, who we believe is doing something behind the scenes. Those things are real. And so a part of it is, let's get that out there, but also let's get out how we can be better. So, for example, one of the classic examples I will use, there was an issue that...
Just one sec, Alec. Whoever's on the phone, if you could please mute your phone, please.
Well, I thought that was...
Did I all hang up, maybe? Okay, just pause your thought, Alec. Sorry, let's deal with this. I did. Anybody on the line? It hung up on us. All right, so we'll try that again. Just hold your thought. I'm sorry, I don't want this to... It's probably not a distraction for everyone, but I can't hear you. We have to redial. So. We are going to take, when Alec is done, we're going to,
Welcome to the Washington. After the tone, please say your name, followed by the pound key.
Public session.
Your call has been placed in conference.
Hello.
All right.
Why did you hang up on us?
All right, we're back in session. Go ahead, Alec. I apologize.
You want to tell anybody to put their phone on mute? Or?
Yeah, please, if you're on the line, please mute your phone. Thank you. Go ahead.
No names are available.
All right.
Okay. But I was going to give you an example.
No names are available.
Well,
no names are available.
I'm going to give a name. An issue came up regarding a choice of words.
No
And
names are available.
and the choice of words were attributed to Governor Swiggle. And a firestorm was starting to brew. I chose to call Governor Swiggle. I chose to call him, one, as a civil rights professional. I wanted to make sure he had at least my context and idea of what he ought to do. He is my friend. We've worked hard on the sections policy work group. And even though he is
No names are
proudly
available.
a reformer, I said, I've got to call him. And when I called him, he blew me out of the water. And I took it because I wanted to hang in there to tell my friend, look, you need to look at this again. You really need to consider an apology. Do what you want to do. Just, I called you. Now, I did that for another reason, because selfish gets a bad rap. So I could have taken the choice, well, let him hang and let it all get crazy. Well, when it gets crazy, it's not only a reflection on Paul, it's a reflection on the Board of Governors. We can't get so caught up in our sides that we don't understand what's the best thing to do for the whole. But those are the things that we're going to have to do a lot more of. A lot more of calling each other and saying between meetings, why did you do this? Not so much how are you going to vote on X or Y or Z, but handling our relationships. Because right now we don't have very much in the way of relationships. And if you don't have relationships, you can't build trust. It won't happen. And so all we will have is trust at a surface level and discord at a moment's notice. And that's hard work. So it's one of the reasons, whether it worked or not, I wanted us to do the communications workshop. There's other suggestions I've made to Rajiv, because we still need to get better about our relationships. And it's everything. Because when you hurt, I actually ought to know that you are hurting and find a way to talk to you about your hurt. Because if not, you carry that. There have been times I have heard different governors talk to me about getting rid of a governor. And at least for me, I've been that person who said every time, whoever it was, that ain't working. Because then that's just our fight that serve our members not at all and make us look horrible. But those are the kinds of things. And as a president-elect, by the way, and as president, I would hope, actually, like I said, being an umpire, that be less involved and less engaged at meetings with the actual discussions, and more involved and more engaged with helping to make the process work for everybody. And that's important. And make the process work for our members, and that's important.
Anything else, Kim? All right, Governor's looking down this side here. Questions, comments for Alec? I see your hand there. You're the president-elect, so you're anything from this side down to the president-elect. There you go.
Thank you, Alec. I deeply appreciate all those things you were saying, and I deeply appreciated your work, actually both you and Governor Cicetti's work on going down to Olympia and testifying and working on the 1788 thing, because I think that's probably one of the most important things we've done as a board this year. And you said something down there in Olympia that I also deeply appreciated, and it's something I really loved hearing, and I thought you might like to tell the board about that as well. And that's, as you said to me, I'm a member guy.
I'm an association guy.
I'm an association guy.
I'm an association guy.
What does that mean to you?
Yeah, and I said that in Hawaii.
Yeah. What does that mean to you?
What that means to me is, however structures turns out, my first line is that we keep WSBA together as an integrated association, as a bar association. That's my first line. And that's because I value, like I said, the breadth and depth of our profession, and want to see more of the members of our profession working with each other and sharing with each other. Simple stuff, but important stuff. And it may start with the sections, but in any case, that's the point, that we are promoting first and foremost the association, not just a bar. I mean, and if we then have to step back, how best to do that and keep the association part as strong as possible.
Governors, questions? Silence on this side. Carla, were you going to say something?
No.
Was that a head fake with the glasses? Yeah. All right. That's right. You threw me off. And down this side, on the line, Brian or Gene, if you're present. Not hearing any questions. Alec, few questions. One, the timing issue, and I asked this the last the preparation for becoming a 100%, nearly 100% seems like on most days, volunteer. You prepared for that?
I feel like I've been doing that already.
All right.
I'm retired, and I now have a little consulting work, but
Good.
Most of my time has been spent with WSBA.
All right. Another question. There's a sort of a dichotomy that I've seen unfold in front of me in the president role, and it's one where there are certain schools of thought that say, look, I'm going to set this question up, so bear with me. You're the president. You are a facilitator. And I do not want to hear you say a word in terms of an opinion on anything. That's one school of thought. You are a facilitator. The other option is there's a school of thought that says, well, you are a facilitator in terms of being the president in the meetings, but you absolutely should be sharing your opinions, because those are opinions that come with about 3 to 4 plus years of exposure to the activity, or more than that even. Where do you line up on that? Because you are and I think this is fair, you are a vocal governor. I don't think you've ever held back and not told us where you stand on a position. So if you were to move into the president's role, would you line up behind one of those two dichotomies or something other than that?
I think it's more of a hybrid,
Okay.
but a part of the hybrid is, again, giving the governors support to be in front. Understanding that there are going to be opportunities for the president to be in front. That leadership is best when it is shared. How else do you help prepare others to take leadership? Leadership is best when you are considering the body. And so there may be, I would want to make sure that if there was a time where I disagreed and had to give that disagreement, the first thing is that would be very rare. Okay? because that's out of respect to the body. And even then, carefully considered and carefully worded.
Good. Thank you. And then the last question I have for you, Alec, it's the words that I'm concerned about. I asked Kyle about it: diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And Kyle responded. I think I asked a poor question because I do believe WSBA is doing an amazing job at trying to address those three areas in a deep and meaningful way. However, the question I should have asked better is this board. I believe we have struggled to get our hands around those concepts and put them into play as a board, not WSBA separately. What could you do to help the board engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay. Well, you may recall, and we've already taken the first step, but it's one that has to continue, which is just like we had our gathering with the Yakima Bar Association, that at least annually the Board of Governors has a gathering with minority bar associations to do the same thing, again, in terms of both relationship building and in recognition of the valuable work that those bar associations do. So that's one. The second one that, and actually we've seen it today, and I'm going to be interested to see how this all plays out. There are some things we do that sometimes we miss that we've done it. So, for example, Sunitha's election today was an important thing to do because that meant that Sunitha was not pigeonholed. Well, we'll make a choice over here and we'll put her in the diversity slot. Mm-hmm. Now, I think the diversity slot is important, but it can't not and should not be limiting. So another part of that is how much we recruit as a Board of Governors minority lawyers to seek governor positions, understanding that the minority bar associations have the issue of not having a, if you will, talent drain going to the bog and not to their organizations. But asking is always an important thing. And then continuing to do the work that we do. So the idea of diversity and inclusion being a necessary part of the regulatory structure and access to justice being a part of that is absolutely critical, so that you're not putting those issues in a secondary role.
All right. Thanks, Alec. That's all the questions I have. And unless there is a governor waving their arms crazy right now, I don't see anything like that. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and it is an honor to both be here and to be there.
All right. All right. It's just a minute before 3. We are going to take a 4-minute break, and then we're going to come back and follow the same process, expecting a motion and a second for a vote. We're going to get started. And actually, that was longer than 4 minutes, and part of the reason it was longer than 4 minutes is because I was informed very graciously that diversity, equity, and inclusion also involves an acknowledgement that it takes some people a little bit longer in the restroom than others. And so I am appreciative of actually someone pointing that out to me. 4 minutes does not always cut it. So thank you. All right, we're back, and now this is the time I need to hear a motion and a second for a vote, with the assumption that the governors will have some discussion. Do I have a Daniel Clark moved. Do we have a second? Second with Russell, second with Kim. Okay. Questions or comments? I'm going to start with the left side. Anybody? Hey, Ethan.
I guess I just would like to hear from fellow members of the board about what we're looking for in the president-elect, and maybe that would help inform what the best next steps are. I know I don't want to call anyone out by name, but I know there were a few of us at one point that thought that running from the Board of Governors wasn't a good idea because of how involved they were with the issues, and that sometimes fresh and outside perspective was helpful in being a neutral arbiter and not being too deep on what we've been discussing. And so I raised that idea out there, but I'd just be curious to hear from my fellow board members what they're looking for as we make this decision.
What are you looking for, Ethan?
Well, I'm looking for, thanks, Dan, I'm looking for someone that is probably from the outside, someone that hasn't been running directly from the Board of Governors. I think that's an important quality I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone that denounces racism and white nationalism. I'm looking for someone that supports equity and inclusion. I'm looking for someone that supports expansion of the LLT program. I'm looking for someone that holds governors accountable for their actions. Those are the qualities I'm looking for.
All right. Thank you, Ethan. Dan.
There's no question that all three of those candidates are completely qualified, and all three would make great presidents. That's clear. We've had talk about going on or off the board to run. I understand the argument, but to me, I want the person who's going to be the best president, at least in my judgment and your judgment. I don't think it's a question of fairness or unfairness. I think, Ethan, you raised a good point about, coming in with fresh eyes. I think that's legitimate. But the idea that it's not fair for someone running off the board, if we should have the most qualified person. And if that person is someone on the board already, that's the person we should put on. To me, the president, the tip of the spear you really see is running the meetings. And there's a lot of stuff the president does, in committee meetings and such, but it really is, the tone you set. Who do you want to be chairing your meetings next year? To me, and I feel badly saying this, I'm going to obviously kind of state a preference here because all three are clearly qualified. I'm really sorry, Kyle, you've had to listen to some baseless innuendo and allegations today. Those types of politics for sport, I just really denounce those. They don't have any place. Making accusations without facts or making accusations in disregard of the fact that you don't know the facts is poorly placed. But look how Kyle responded to that. 5 minutes of baseless cross-examination, impugning his character. Looking at him even just 60 seconds ago, I want someone to denounce white supremacy or whatever you said, and looked at him like Kyle didn't. I couldn't have kept my mouth shut the way Kyle did. And I don't think there are many people in this room who could say that. That's who you need as your chair. Because as you go forward, you're going to have a lot more divisive issues. And one of the things we have struggled with is people throwing gas on the fire. I have never heard Kyle raise his voice. I've never seen him get mad. I've never heard him say a harsh word. I'm not saying I've heard Alec do that, but I have heard you raise your voice, probably in response to me raising my voice first, actually. But those are qualities, standing in the face of baseless attack for sport, or where points being made, that's rare. And that's what you need. I think all three are qualified. I think Alec would be a great president. I think a lot of people around this table would be great presidents. But that demeanor, like a judge, is what you're going to need next year. And so that's what I'm looking for, Ethan, is someone who can stand up to false, baseless attacks and not make it personal. And I think that person is Alec. Pardon me, Alec, is Kyle. looking at you. So, I mean, that's how I feel about it. But it's just, which is not to say that Alec or our other gentlemen are not qualified. It's just a personal preference. I mean, if two other people were running this year, I'd be voting for you. You gave an incredibly impassioned speech, and I share your values, and I also share how you view the chair. I think that is the way you look at it. But it's just, that's where I'm coming down this year.
Anyone else? Thank you, Dan. Kim.
I just want to say this has been a real enlightening experience for me, and it's going to be a difficult decision because I liked what everybody said. I think they're all highly qualified. But what I'm looking for in a president is someone who's very calm, non-judgmental, hard to ruffle, somebody who can field comments, whether they're positive, negative, angry, calm, whatever. Someone who's not too opinionated in that position, because I think that it's very important to be neutral. But I think what we need right now is calmness and steadfastness and an approach that will include everybody, their personalities, their prejudices, their concerns, the things that make them frazzled and angry. I think that everybody that spoke today would fit in some of those categories. And I want to thank everybody for expressing what I thought was really, really good objectives and concerns about this position, because it's a very, very tough position. It's going to be a hard decision. So thank you, everybody, because you gave me some information to cogitate on.
We got Russell and then Paul. Ping and pong.
I certainly agree with the comments that other governors have made that we have three highly qualified candidates running. I think Alec hit the nail on the head when he said we have an embarrassment of riches. That is an incredibly good sign for our organization. And in an organization at a time when there's a lot of pessimism, this is optimism, that we have highly qualified, dedicated servants willing to step up and run for a position that's going to impact your how much money you're making in your practice. It's going to impact how much time you can spend with your family. It is a extreme sacrifice, and I am very thankful that we have people that are willing to do that. I hadn't met Zach before. I was really impressed with his materials, very impressed with his interview. Got to chat with him briefly today. I think he'd do an excellent job. Obviously, we all know Kyle and Alec, and I think we'd all be very lucky to have them as presidents. I don't think it's a coincidence that two of the people we sent down to the legislature to talk to the legislature about our concerns with 1788 are running for president. And one of them is our president-elect. And one of the greatest successes that we had this year is saving the Bar Act and preserving self-governance for at least another year. We'll deal with it again next year. But that is a cornerstone, in my opinion, of who we are. And Alec and Kyle and Paul and Rajiv and everyone that went down there really helped. You guys did a great job, and I'm glad to see people that were there are the ones that are running for president. I also think one of the things we need to focus on is, ability to bring groups together and be able to cause us to get along. And I thought Alec told a really great story about reaching out to Paul when Paul, I think, inadvertently made a comment that was not intended the way a couple of people interpreted it. And there are two ways to go about this. There's one way to say, well, we voted differently on issues. I want to see this guy go down, this guy look bad. That's not who we want running our organization. We want someone who's going to reach out to someone who has differing views and say, let me help you. Because helping people that are opposed to you helps our organization. And Alec, you did a great job with that. And we're better off for it. Paul's better off for it. And I think the whole organization is. So when I cast my vote today, and I'll tell you that I'm going to vote for Kyle Schicchetti, and I want to explain why. And it's not a vote against any of the other people running. It's because I think that the next 2 years has the potential to be the most transformative period of time in our history. Our entire structure will likely change, and I think Kyle has an excellent finger on the pulse of what's going on with the Bar Structures Work Group. Our organization appointed him to be one of the representatives. He understands that. I also really respect the fact that as a practicing lawyer, Kyle is running for president. It's an easier thing to do when you're retired, but we can't be an organization of retired people governing practicing lawyers. That doesn't work. We have to have practicing lawyers involved as well, and people who are retired as well. But we need to have that balance, and it's not the only factor. But I appreciate that Kyle has said, I'm willing to take a sacrifice in what I will make in my practice in order to serve this organization. And so for those reasons, very, very hard decision, not a vote against anyone. But I just wanted to give that explanation of why I'm going to vote for Kyle for president.
All right, thanks, Russell. Governors, any other governors? I say Paul, and then Chris.
Well, all very, excellent comments so far, and I agree with virtually all of them. The bar has been painted, I think, unfairly as, awash in chaos. A lot of that chaos, I think, has just been manufactured. I think we saw some of it today, and I was very happy to hear Governor Bridges pointed out, the baseless attacks really have been the chaos. And the idea of an outside person, Zachary Mosner, stepping up is, very intriguing. Just really didn't have expectation to, have someone blow it out of the water so incredibly, just to step up. And it's like, wow. I said, Kevin's like, hey, that was really impressive. So congratulations, Zach, on stepping up and, just really, having a really firm grasp on what this organization's about and what it needs. I am very optimistic about this bar association, and I've just always been in love with it and always been a huge supporter. I skew toward member support, member engagement sections, but I really love the service of the public aspect of it. And it's just, as everyone has said, there's 3 incredible candidates, and it's wonderful that despite, the purported chaos at the Bar Association, such talented people are willing to step up and be its leader. I felt too busy. I didn't throw my hat in the ring. So kudos to everyone who did. Alec and I go way back. We fought in the trenches in a situation called the Section Policy Work Group Fiasco. I've named it Fiasco. And that was a really tough situation, and we forged our friendship, as did Kim Hunter and I then, and we all decided, well, we got to get on the Board of Governors. And Kim and I think got on first, and then really encouraged Alec to get on and supported his candidacy. And he and I have I really rarely voted the same way on anything, but we still get along great. We're very good friends. I have great respect for his intellect and the reasons that he votes the way he does most of the time. Unless I know he's just voting against me for some reason. Very rare, very rare. I also will be voting for Kyle Schicchetti, though. The 3 of us worked great down in Olympia together, and it was just a fantastic accomplishment we achieved. I see Kyle as just, he's really thrown his oars in the water and worked hard on a number of things, the legislation front and a variety of areas, both fighting 1788 and also serving on the legislative committee, which are going to be, that bill's coming back, and I really want to see someone who's passionate and, in that seat, the elect seat there. And I think that Kyle is probably has sort of kind of walked the middle line the best, I think, in through these, really the chaos, the contention is, essentially, are you a reformer, or are you not a reformer? And Kyle has looked at every issue individually and just made up his mind on the merits of each issue. And I think he's done so in a way that has been non-offensive, has been thoughtful, collegial. And so that's how I'll be voting. But I really appreciate that Alex throwing his hat in the ring, and I also am very impressed with Zach.
All right, thanks, Paul. Chris?
I've been castigated in writing, believe it or not, as being an anti-reformer, something which probably comes as a surprise to many of my friends and colleagues. Thank you. PJ's phone is ringing while I'm talking. What I want to say is how much I appreciate that Kyle and Alec have modeled civility and respect throughout their tenure on the board with me. I appreciate that. And I know that when we are done with discovery and with complying with an order of the King County Superior Court, there will not be any communication from either of you that will be embarrassing to this institution, the board and the bar. So thank you both. As an attorney, I believe in consistency. And when I first came on this board in 2016, I was dismayed at how many people were being elected as president-elect from the Board of Governors. And I expressed my dismay at the time, and I considered it actually a reform for us to look at that. The president asked me to chair a work group to analyze how we elect the president-elect, taking into consideration geographical diversity, taking into consideration prior board service, really trying to approach with an open mind the concept of how that happens. Well, my work group, which was going to be ably assisted by Jim McPherson, our historian, never was able to go forward because the Supreme Court sent a letter saying all bylaw amendments are put on hold. So our work group was put on hold. But in 2015, we elected Robin Haynes from the board. In 2016, we elected Brad Furlong from the board. In 2017, we elected Bill Pickett from the board. And in 2018, we elected Rajiv Mujumdar from the board. And I don't say anything bad about any of these people. I think they're great. But I think if we want to be reformers, and if we really want to approach the governance of this institution with an open heart and an open mind, I think we need to elect our presidents-elect from outside. And I said that in 2016, and I didn't have much of a choice in 2017 because Bill was the only candidate. I said it again in 2018, and while I have a great deal of respect for Kyle and Alec, love you both, I'm voting for the outsider today, and I appreciate Zach stepping up. I've never, like most of you, I've never met him before today, but I think he has an impressive resume. I think that he will approach this not from a faction. I think that he will bring to the table a point of reference that we have not seen. I think we need to someday, somehow, maybe when the structures work group is complete, we need to go back and take a look at how we elect the president-elect. If we're still in the business of electing president-elect, which we might not be after the structures work group is done. But I think that's something that we should look long and hard at, because I think for our members, to see us constantly electing our own as the president-elect, I don't think that sends a great message. And so thanks for everything that you have both done and will continue to do. And please think about ways in which we can look at these elections differently. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Other comments from the governors? PJ Grabicki is getting on the train right now. Peter, yes.
Thank you. I respectfully disagree. I have served on a number of boards. I have drafted a lot of bylaws governing organizations, both for-profit and non-profit, over my years in practice. I think one of the worst flaws of the governance mechanism of this organization is that people are elected to this board, they serve 3 years, and then they're gone and they can never come back. I think that is crazy. I think that a governor should be able to run for re-election for one term. I think after they've been off for 3 or 4 years, they ought to be able to run again. I think we've got all sorts of people out there that have all sorts of wisdom and experience that are barred by our silly bylaws, I think the bylaws were probably invented by a camel, from providing us with the service and wisdom that they could. I also think that a president-elect should be required to have served on the board at some time. I don't think it has to come from the current board, and maybe it's better that it doesn't. But I think that you should have experienced at least 3 years of board work in order to have the knowledge and the background to sit in that chair up there. So those are my views, and as we go forward and start muddling through restructuring, I will continue to articulate that as kind of being a best practice.
Thanks, PJ. Any other comments from the governors? I'm looking around and I'm not seeing hands. Not that I'm trying to encourage you not to raise your hands. We also want to hear from our honorary immediate past president-in-fact, Mr. McPherson, please. Ha.
Thanks. You never did offer me that position.
We just appointed.
Going old school like we are, I decided maybe I was not approached and asked to recommend anybody, and I have been in the past, not within any of your knowledgeable lifetimes, but I've decided that I should make a couple of comments because there was one area that was completely left out here that was not considered. But let me begin with this. The task force that I told you about that had crashed and burned and failed that I was involved in about 15 years ago was on this topic, was on the election of governors, and was also on the election of the president. And we had all kinds of ideas, like I've heard from PJ and others, it should come from the outside or not, or that you had to be on the board or not to do it. And there were lots of, and we were getting close to maybe some resolutions in that. The first that I recall that came on was Jan Erik Peterson. He had not been on the board, but he had been on the board. He knew about it. He had been there before. He had gone through it, and he decided that later in his career it was time that he could go back and become president. So I really liked your comment, PJ, about actually having sat through the process. And so that kind of changed that a little bit, but really what blew it out of the water for me personally was Ellen Dial. Fabulous president, had not been on the board, but she had been active in the Bar Association. So she knew the ins and outs, and she literally sat in these chairs because she was part of as I recall, it's so long now, but I think it was the rent. It had to do with, she was a business person and a real estate person. She was fabulous at it, and she helped the bar move from one facility to another, something like that. So she was a perfect candidate. And so what I became aware of is that you need to look at the candidate for today. You can't have these hard and fast rules. You got to look at who's the best right now. And these are my thoughts about these particular candidates. Although I loved Zach, I didn't hear a lot of comments about him being knowledgeable about how the bar works, the guts of it, the insides of it that you guys all know about now. I think it's very helpful, particularly when we're in this mini crisis and have to decide what the structure is going to be. And the thing that wasn't mentioned was part of my task force, and what I've heard a little bit about this, is the diversity of the presidency. Don't forget that you guys look at each other and you're very aware of what's going on. You talk to attorneys out on the street, they don't know anything about what you guys are talking about. Half of them don't even read the bar, whatever it's called now, the Northwest Lawyer or something like that. All they want to do is see who's been disbarred. They don't even read it. So they're not aware that somewhat they're aware of the tension that's going on in here, but they're not deep aware of it. Everybody in this room is very aware of it, but they're not. What they're aware of are other kinds of things. Nobody has mentioned the fact that Kyle said, I'm from Vancouver. How many presidents have ever come from Vancouver? 0. How big is Vancouver as far as a city? Much bigger than we even think about. What is he, 4th or 5th? 5th? 4th. He's also the member of the Oregon Bar. He's also a member of the Idaho Bar. I happen to be a member of the Hawaii Bar. He knows about bar structures from 2 other bars that he's personally involved in. I think that although I love Alec, he's a personal friend of mine after all these years, and most of you who know me, I feel friendly with every single person here. The person for right now is Kyle. The person to come back and help us later is Alec. And he's not going anywhere. And he'll be here later, too. And I just think that if you got to make a decision, if I was voting now, and I've rarely done this, I would ask Zach to get more involved in the organization now and be a presence and show us your skills, and tell Alec to stick around, and tell Kyle you've made a tough choice with you and your family, and I would appreciate it, and that's who I would vote for.
Thanks, Jim. Doug.
I don't ordinarily speak during elections, and I'm not going to take a position for or against any of these candidates. Wouldn't be prudent. But I do want to correct the record by way of parting company with my good friend Jim McPherson on a point of fact. You may have missed, because during Zach Mosner's recitation of his impressive array of achievements, you may have missed that he mentioned he was a special district counsel for the Bar Association. You may have missed that he was the chair of the disciplinary board and served on the disciplinary board for several years. You may have missed that he was on the Rules of Professional Conduct Committee. And you may have missed that for many years he was a conflict review officer. Now, I know that the regulatory functions are sometimes overlooked when it comes to the important work of the Washington State Bar Association. It's sort of pushed to the side. And it's hoped that it's all running and functioning well, but very much it is the case that the regulatory functions are part of the inner workings of what the Bar Association is and does. And I dare say few present in this room know that side of how the Bar Association works, and it's not insignificant. And if I may close by saying some words about thankless tasks. There are many thankless tasks in life. There's no doubt about that. Many of them come in the form of volunteer service. But there are some thankless tasks that are more thankless than others. Now, in Zach's recitation of some of his volunteer service for the bar, he mentioned conflicts review officer. Now, probably very few of us in this room even know what a conflict review officer does, and we're not going to go into that right now, but take it from me, that is the ultimate thankless task when it comes to volunteering for the Washington State Bar Association. So for what it's worth, Zach, thank you for doing that.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments? We're going to push through here because we're losing some time. All right. We have the motion. Ready to vote. All right. We're going to start to my left, and we're ready to record. Yes. Okay. Dan B.
I'd be happy with any three of those people as the next president, but I am going to vote for Kyle.
Ethan.
I'm going to vote for Zachary Mosner.
Thank you. Russell.
Kyle Schicchetti.
Dan Clark.
Dan votes for Kyle.
With much hesitancy, Kyle.
I'm going to vote for Zach.
Chris.
Zach.
Did we get Sunitha? I didn't say Sunitha. Okay. I know, but I didn't say her name, and I'm trying to say everybody's name. Peter Jennings.
Kyle.
Paul.
Kyle.
Your call is very important to us. Please stay on the line.
Alec.
Thank you.
Alec.
Carla.
Though I agree we have three very excellent candidates, and with all great respect to the other two, I'm going to cast my vote for Kyle.
Very, very tough decision for me, but I am going to vote for Kyle.
I just want to ask a question, if I could, Julie. And this just for clarification. Something seems odd to me that we have three candidates and one of
After
them
the tone,
can't
please
vote.
say your name, followed by the pound key.
It's just there's something about that
Your
seems
call has been placed in conference.
that we have three candidates and one of them sits there and he cannot vote for him. And I know in the past we've asked governors to recuse if they wanted to. So that seemed odd, but yeah. And I'm not looking for argument. I was just asking Julie. We're on pace.
So you're asking me right now, so I haven't had a chance to look at it. Off
All
the
right.
top of my head, I'm not aware of anything in the bylaws that would require it,
Okay.
but I can look into it.
Well, and if I remember right, it was a voluntary thing. Yeah, I got it.
Somebody's got their hold music on for us, and the bog has disconnected in order to avoid the terrible hold music, I believe.
Okay, we're connected again.
Oh, thanks.
All right. If you mute your phones, Brian, you're up.
Hello?
Yes, Brian Tollefson, if you're there.
Hello, this is Brian Tollefson. I cast my vote for Kyle Schicchetti.
Thank you, Brian. And then Jean Kang.
Kyle Schicchetti, please.
All right. Vote totals. All right. 10 votes in favor of Kyle. Congratulations, Kyle. You're president-elect.
Can I say thank you? I thought all the wonderful things that people said about me in these letters was great. The thoughts that people expressed today, even better. So I appreciate that. My only regret was that I could not convince Governor Meserve to run for this spot because I thought she would make a great president, and I couldn't. I couldn't convince her, but I tried. But thank you to all.